Stop whatever you're doing for a second because I need to show you something on a map. Find France. Classic hexagon, Western Europe, got it. Now scroll south, past Spain, past the Atlantic, all the way down to South America. See that country on the northeastern coast? French Guiana, that is France. Not a former colony, not a protectorate, not some historical footnote. France. Right now, today, with euro coins and French passports and EU regulations, France shares an active land border with Brazil. And if that single fact just rewired something in your brain, good. Because we're about to do that 14 more times. By the end of this video, you will never look at a world map the same way again. Let's get into it. France is one of those countries everyone thinks they understand. You know the Eiffel Tower, you know the wine, you know the baguettes. Maybe you took a week in Paris once. But geographically, France is one of the most genuinely bizarre, rule-breaking, boundary-defying countries on the planet. It stretches across multiple continents, touches a dozen time zones, and contains ecosystems that have no business existing next to each other. Most people walk away from school geography with a postcard version of France. Today, we're throwing that postcard in the bin. Here are 15 geography facts about France that sound completely made up, but are absolutely, verifiably real. Fact 1. France shares a land border with Brazil. Let's expand on the hook because this one deserves the full story. French Guiana is located on the northeastern shoulder of South America, wedged between Suriname to the west and Brazil to the south and east. It covers about 83,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Portugal. And it is not a territory, not a dependency, not a colony in any modern legal sense. It is an overseas region of France, which means it has the same political status as Brittany or Burgundy. Members of the European Parliament represent it. French labor law applies there. Children go to school in French. The currency is the euro, even though you're deep in South America. The border with Brazil runs for about 730 kilometers along the Oyapock River. There's even a bridge, the Oyapock River Bridge, that connects the two countries. Drive across it and you've just crossed from France into Brazil without boarding a plane. That is not a sentence that should be possible to say, and yet here we are. This fact alone tends to permanently break people's mental model of what a country even means. Fact 2. France is the largest country in the EU, depending on how you count. Here's where fact 1 has a ripple effect. Because French Guiana exists, and because it's legally France, the total land area of France, when you include all overseas regions, is somewhere around 643,000 square kilometers. That makes France the largest country in the European Union by a significant margin. But here's the twist. Most maps and most statistics use only metropolitan France, the hexagon in Europe, which clocks in at about 551,000 square kilometers. On that measure, France is still the largest country in Western Europe, but loses ground to Ukraine in the broader European continent. So France is simultaneously the biggest and not quite the biggest, depending entirely on which version of France you're counting. It's a country that changes size based on what question you ask. Try explaining that at a pub quiz and watch the room argue for 20 minutes. Fact 3. France spans more time zones than any other country on Earth. 12. France operates across 12 time zones. To put that in perspective, the United States covers 6. Russia, the largest country on Earth by land mass, covers 11. France beats them all, and it does so almost entirely because of its overseas territories scattered across the globe. Think about the geography of this for a moment. When it's noon in Paris, it's 8 a.m. in Martinique in the Caribbean, 7 a.m. in French Guiana, and on the other side of the world, it's already the next calendar day in French Polynesia. French civil servants, technically working for the same government, are clocking in and out across a full rotation of the Earth. The French Republic spans from the edge of the Arctic Circle all the way to the South Pacific. One government, one president, 12 time zones. It's quietly one of the most extraordinary geographic facts about any nation-state in existence. Fact 4. The closest piece of France to the US is off the coast of Canada. Most people picture the Atlantic Ocean as this vast, clean separation between North America and Europe. But tucked 25 kilometers off the southwestern tip of Newfoundland, Canada, sits Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, a small French archipelago of about 6,000 people that is, in every legal and administrative sense, France. These islands were part of the original French colonial holdings in North America, and unlike almost every other French territory on the continent, France never gave them up. They survived the 7 Years' War, the American Revolution, the Napoleonic era, and 2 world wars while remaining stubbornly, completely French. Today, residents pay French taxes, use French passports, vote in French elections, and shop with euros, while their nearest neighbors are Canadians using Canadian dollars a short ferry ride away. It's a genuine piece of old world France preserved in the North Atlantic, and almost nobody outside the region knows it exists. Fact 5. Nobody officially knows if Mont Blanc is French or Italian. Mont Blanc is the tallest peak in the Alps at 4,808 meters, and it's the mountain most people point to when they want an example of European geographical dominance. But here's the awkward part. France and Italy cannot agree on where exactly the border runs across its summit. The mountain straddles the boundary between the two countries, and while both nations claim the peak, there's no binding international treaty that definitively settles it. Italy's official maps have shown the border running through the summit, putting the highest point in Italian territory. French maps disagree. Mountaineering organizations have weighed in. Diplomats have met. And yet, as of today, the question remains officially unresolved. The most famous mountain in Western Europe exists in a kind of sovereign limbo, claimed by 2 countries, confirmed by neither, which means every year, millions of tourists summit a mountain that technically doesn't know which country it belongs to.
Fact 6. More people visit France each year than live there. France is the most visited country on Earth and has held that title for decades. Pre-pandemic, it was regularly welcoming between 85 and 90 million international tourists per year. France's own population is approximately 68 million people. That means in any given year, the number of foreigners visiting France exceeds the number of French citizens living in the country. Practically speaking, this creates a kind of parallel geography. There's the France that French people live in, agricultural, industrial, regional, deeply varied. And then there's the France that tourists experience, which is weighted heavily toward Paris, the Loire Valley, the Riviera, and wine country. The overwhelming majority of visitors never see Brittany's coastline, the volcanic plateaus of the Massif Central, or the wetlands of the Camargue. They experience France as a greatest hits album, while an entire country exists just off stage. Fact 7. The Seine flows north. Rivers flow downhill. Downhill intuitively means south, toward the equator, toward lower ground. This is wrong, but it's a remarkably common assumption. The Seine River, which cuts through the heart of Paris, flows generally north and west, exiting France entirely at the English Channel near Le Havre. It has nothing to do with the equator and everything to do with France's topography, which tilts toward the northwest. The Rhône goes south, the Loire goes west, the Seine goes north. French rivers do not follow anybody's intuitions, and that's just how it is. The strangest fact is still coming, but first, let's head to the coast. Fact 8. France has 2 completely different coastlines with different climates. Stand on a beach in Biarritz on the Atlantic coast. The waves are powerful, the water is cool, the air is damp and oceanic. Drive 6 hours east to Nice on the Mediterranean. The water is calm, intensely blue, warmer, and the climate is dry and sun-baked. These are not minor variations. They are fundamentally different coastal environments. The Atlantic side of France deals with Gulf Stream weather systems, strong tides, and cooler temperatures. The Mediterranean side is geologically older, geographically enclosed, and climatically closer to North Africa than to Northern Europe. 1 country, 2 coasts, 2 completely different oceanic personalities. Fact 9. Alsace has switched countries 4 times since 1871. The Alsace region in northeastern France, known for its half-timbered villages, Riesling wines, and Franco-German culture, has changed national hands 4 times since 1871. After the Franco-Prussian War, it became German. After World War I, it returned to France. Germany took it again in World War II. France recovered it in 1945. A family that lived there across 3 generations could have been legally born French, grown-up German, lived middle-aged French, then spent their later years German, before dying French again, in the same house, in the same village, looking at the same hills. Alsatian culture reflects all of this. The architecture, the dialect, the food, the surnames are a living record of a border that refused to stay still. Fact 10. There's a Spanish town completely surrounded by France. In the Eastern Pyrenees, a small Spanish municipality called Livia sits entirely within French territory, an exclave created by accident. The 1659 Treaty of the Pyrenees transferred 33 villages from Spain to France, but Livia, which held the status of a town rather than a village, was excluded by a technicality in the treaty's wording. The result, a roughly 12 square kilometer pocket of Spain, surrounded on all sides by France, connected to the rest of Spain only by a neutral road that passes through French land. It's still today. You can drive from France into Livia, buy Spanish groceries, and drive back into France, all without crossing any official border checkpoint. Fact 11. Wild flamingos and white horses live together in southern France. The Camargue is a river delta in the south of France, where the Rhône meets the Mediterranean. It's a vast wetland of salt marshes, lagoons, and grasslands, and it's home to wild white horses, enormous herds of black bulls, and one of Europe's largest populations of wild flamingos, all of them coexisting in France about 45 minutes from Arles. This is not a wildlife park or a managed reserve in the zoo sense. These are genuinely wild animals in a genuinely wild landscape, and it looks so improbable that first-time visitors often assume they've taken a wrong turn toward Africa. Fact 12. The Lascaux caves were initially suspected to be a hoax. When 4 teenagers discovered the Lascaux cave system in the Dordogne in 1940, the paintings inside were so detailed, so vivid, and so compositionally sophisticated that experts initially struggled to accept they were 17,000 years old. Horses, bulls, stags, and abstract symbols cover the walls in pigments that have survived millennia. The caves have since been closed to the public to prevent deterioration, but exact replicas have been built nearby that recreate them at full scale. France contains what many archaeologists consider the greatest surviving gallery of prehistoric art on Earth, and it's in a quiet valley in the southwest that most tourists never visit. Fact 13. France produces wine in every major climate category. From the cold, chalky soils of Champagne in the north to the sun-scorched Mediterranean slopes of Roussillon in the south, France's geographic range is so extreme that it encompasses every major wine-producing climate type that viticulture recognizes. Cool continental, maritime, Mediterranean, semi-continental, they're all here. This isn't just an agricultural footnote. It means French wine regions aren't variations on a theme. They represent genuinely different answers to the question of what wine is. Burgundy and Bordeaux are more climatically different from each other than either is from wine regions in Germany or Spain. Fact 14. No point in metropolitan France is more than 500 km from the sea. France is often described as a peninsular country, and for good reason. The Atlantic Ocean lies to the west, the Mediterranean to the south, the English Channel to the north. Even the dead center of France, somewhere in the Massif Central Highlands, is within roughly 500 kilometers of salt water. This gives France an unusually moderate climate for a country of its size, and it's one of the reasons French agriculture is so diverse. There's virtually no interior that's isolated from oceanic influence. Fact 15. France is the only country in both the G7 and the Southern Hemisphere. Because French Guiana and other overseas territories lie below the equator, France is the only G7 nation with sovereign territory in the Southern Hemisphere. It's also the only country in the world to have territory on 5 continents simultaneously. Europe, South America, North America, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, Africa, Mayotte, Réunion, and Oceania, French Polynesia, New Caledonia. France is, in the most technical geographic sense, a genuinely global country, not historically, not formally, but right now. 15 facts, and honestly, we barely scratched the surface. France is a country that keeps revealing new layers the more you look at it, which is either deeply satisfying or mildly destabilizing, depending on your relationship with maps. If one of these genuinely surprised you, drop it in the comments. I'm curious which one landed hardest. And if you want to go deeper, I've got a full video on the world's strangest borders sitting right over there. Fair warning, Livia comes up again. Subscribe for more amazing France facts.